The architect always has a backup plan, they say. But when your own foundation turns into a wrecking ball, and when the men you handpick to be the future of this industry decide to bury you under the rubble of your own legacy, there is only one response left in the playbook. You don't rebuild. You don't negotiate. You burn it all down until there is nothing left but ash and the memory of what used to be. Welcome back to Wrestling Apocalypse. If you thought the betrayal of the Shield was the coldest moment in Seth Rollins' career, or if you thought he was finally a spent force after being decimated by the very monsters he created, you need to sit down and brace yourselves. Because tonight, the Visionary didn't just return to Monday Night Raw, he brought a level of unadulterated, cinematic vengeance that has left the medical team working overtime and the locker room in a state of absolute, paralyzed terror. We are talking about the night Seth Freakin Rollins hunted the Hunters, turning Bron Breakker and Big Bronson Reed from the masters of the ring into the victims of a masterpiece. To understand the sheer magnitude of tonight's violence, we have to look at the landscape of Raw over the last few months. It has been a dark, oppressive era. Since the implosion of the Vision faction back in October, Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed have been walking through that curtain like they owned the deeds to the building. They haven't just been winning matches, they've been erasing people. They've been parading around with a sense of entitlement that was nauseating to watch, constantly mocking the man who plucked them from the midcard and gave them the keys to the kingdom. Bron, with that terrifying, vein-popping intensity, and Reed, the 330-pound human tsunami, truly believed they had ended the era of Rollins. They thought the architect was retired, broken, and buried. They thought he was at home, sitting in a rocking chair, nursing his back and his pride. But they forgot the most fundamental rule of this business: Seth Rollins isn't just a wrestler. He is a high-functioning sociopath when he's pushed to the edge. He is an infection in the mind of his enemies. And once he's in your head, he never truly leaves, he just waits for the lights to go out. The show opened tonight with a chilling sense of normalcy. Bron Breakker and Bronson Reed stood in the center of the ring, bathed in the spotlight, flanked by the wise man himself, Paul Heyman. Heyman looked smug, like a man who had finally traded in his old, broken-down car for 2 brand-new tanks. Bron was on the microphone, his voice echoing through the arena, barking about how the old guard was officially dead and how he had personally retired the most influential superstar of the last decade. The fans were visceral. The "We Want Seth" chants were so loud they were distorting the audio on the broadcast. It was a primal cry for a savior. And then, it happened. But it didn't start with the music. Rollins is too smart, too tactical for a grand entrance when he's on a warpath. It started with a glitch. The massive LED boards surrounding the ring didn't show the Visionary logo. They showed static. And then, through the PA system, came that single, high-pitched, manic laugh. It wasn't the Joker laugh we've grown accustomed to over the last year. This was hollow. This was the laugh of a man who had seen the bottom of the abyss and decided to move in. Suddenly, the crowd erupted into a roar that I can only describe as deafening. A figure in a black tactical vest, a direct, haunting callback to the Shield days, descended from the rafters on a rappel line. It wasn't just a return, it was a tactical insertion. Before Bron Breakker could even register the movement, Seth was on the canvas. He didn't dance. He didn't conduct the crowd. He hit the ring with a steel chair that sounded like a literal gunshot when it connected with Bron's back. The sound of that first strike, you could feel it in your own spine. It wasn't a wrestling chair shot. It was a "I want to break your ribs" chair shot. Bronson Reed tried to intervene, charging like a freight train with all 330 pounds behind him. In any other scenario, that's the end of the segment. But Rollins moved with a kinetic energy we haven't seen in half a decade. He used the chair to trip the big man, sending Reed face-first into the turnbuckle with a thud that shook the camera rig. What followed was 10 minutes of the most surgical, high-impact violence ever recorded in the modern era of Raw. Rollins didn't just fight them, he dismantled them. He wasn't looking for a pinfall. He was looking for a reckoning. He dragged Bron Breakker over to the announce table, his eyes wide and vacant. He didn't say a word to the commentators. He just looked at Michael Cole, gave a hauntingly calm nod, and delivered a curb stomp to Bron that looked like it shifted the entire table off its hinges. You could see Bron's body go limp. The man who calls himself the Dog was effectively put to sleep. The commentary team was in a state of pure, unscripted shock. Michael Cole was screaming about the return of the architect, while Wade Barrett sat in stunned silence. Backstage, our sources are telling us the locker room was paralyzed. We've heard that superstars who usually walk with immense bravado, guys who have been in the ring with the toughest legends, were seen huddled around the monitors, whispering. The consensus was simple: this isn't the Seth we know. This is something else. The unbelievable part of this vengeance, the part that's going to be talked about for years, wasn't just the physical attack. It was the psychological trauma Seth inflicted on Paul Heyman. After leaving Bron in a heap, Seth turned his attention to Bronson Reed, who was trying to crawl away. Seth didn't use a move. He grabbed the microphone, his face smeared with sweat and the literal blood of his former protégés. He didn't address the fans. He walked over to Paul Heyman, who was cowering against the barricade, grabbed him by the tie, and whispered loud enough for the mic to catch, "I built them, Paul. I know where the screws are. And I'm the only one who knows how to unscrew them." He then proceeded to deliver a second curb stomp to Bronson Reed, but this time, he did it off the steel steps and onto the concrete floor. The sound, it was a dull, sickening thud. The medical staff rushed the ring immediately, but Rollins just stood there, looking at his hands as if he were surprised they were still attached to his body. The fan perspective tonight was a total frenzy. This wasn't just a pop for a returning hero. This was an exorcism. The Seth Freakin Rollins chants evolved into something primal, something tribal. People were standing on their chairs, some were in tears, and others were screaming for Seth to finish the job. This is the storytelling we live for, the moment where the hero is pushed so far into the darkness that he becomes the very nightmare his enemies feared would eventually come for them. Think about the stakes now. We are heading toward a collision course that will redefine the World Heavyweight Championship and the hierarchy of the WWE. Seth Rollins hasn't just come back for his belt. He's come back for the souls of the men who betrayed him. He has turned Monday Night Raw into a psychological thriller, and he is the one holding the camera. The vision as a faction is dead. In its place is a landscape of fire, rubble, and a man who has rediscovered his most dangerous self. The industry is shaking. We're hearing that management is meeting behind closed doors to discuss extreme sanctions or even another suspension for Rollins' actions tonight. But how do you punish a man who has already lost everything? How do you find a man who has burned down every bridge he's ever crossed and walked through the flames with a smile? Seth Rollins is officially the most dangerous man in the WWE tonight, not because he's the strongest, but because he's the smartest and the most vengeful. We are going to be tracking this 24/7 here at Wrestling Apocalypse. We've got analysts looking at the frame-by-frame footage of those curb stomps to see if there was any permanent damage to Bron's neck. We're reaching out to our contacts in the medical wing to see if Bronson Reed will even be cleared for the next tour. And we are waiting, with bated breath, for a response from the Bloodline or Paul Heyman. This is the turning point. This is the moment where the architect reminds the world that he owns the blueprints to this entire business, and he's decided the current building needs to be demolished. But I want to hear from you. The Wrestling Apocalypse community always has the best insights. Was Seth's attack justified after the months of psychological and physical torment he suffered? Did Bron and Bronson deserve to be dismantled with such cruelty, or did the visionary go too far into a place he can't come back from? Is Paul Heyman already looking for a new Plan C now that his monsters have been tamed by their creator? Drop your theories in the comments. I want to see the burn it down emojis, and I want to hear your predictions for the fallout. If you felt that adrenaline surge when that laugh hit the speakers tonight, make sure you hit the like button. It's the best way to support the channel and keep these deep dives coming. Smash that subscribe button and ring the bell, because you do not want to miss our emergency follow-up tomorrow where we analyze why this is the most important return of the decade. The architect is back, the vengeance is real, and the apocalypse has officially arrived for anyone standing in his way. I've been your host for Wrestling Apocalypse, and remember, never, ever turn your back on a man who knows exactly where you're most vulnerable. Stay safe, stay loud, and we'll see you at the next bell.